So I was thinking, preparing for this shiur, people are interested to hear about Rabbi Steinsaltz. Rabbi Dean Steinsaltz, maybe some of the people met him, maybe some heard of him, probably plenty read some of his books in Hebrew or in English. And I was thinking, how am I supposed to start talking about someone who is so big and his work was so wide, worldwide, and for an extent of 50, 60 years of a person working. So I was thinking, how do I start, grasping this person? And I said to myself, well, what would Rabbi Steinsaltz do in such a situation? How would Rabbi Steinsaltz speak about people that he admires and he looks up to? And I thought about it, and I found actually two good examples in his writings that I think could give us some sort of guidelines how to talk about him himself. And those are two books that are actually also translated. One was written in English and one was translated into English. The first book is called Biblical Images. I see there's a couple people with their cameras off. That's fine. If you want to participate with cameras on, that would also be awesome because we'll get to know each other. So the first book is called Biblical Images. Biblical Images is a book where Rabbi Steinsaltz basically chooses people from the Tanakh and writes short essays about them, 3 or 4 page essays, where he kind of gives us overview of the person's life as we know from the Tanakh and gives some insights to it. And what's amazing in what he does when he deals with biblical images, and you could see this also on a YouTube from the year 2014, Rabbi Steinsaltz himself speaks about it in a global day of learning beautifully, where he describes how are you supposed to talk about biblical images. And he says, well, these people were people like me and you. They were normal people. They were not angels. And at the same time, they were people who achieved great, great things in their lives, which put them into the Tanakh, which made them become our forefathers and our sages and our people that we look up to. And from that combination of being very, very human and at the same time very, very great, Rabbi Steinsaltz looks at the people. And he's not afraid to look at those biblical images, flaws, and areas that are less comfortable, and even say, this is a problem with this personality, right? We could all think about those people in the Tanakh where we say, okay, there was something wrong here. David HaMelech actually, King David actually did something that was problematic. And how do we look at that, right? And at the same time, not the human aspect that I look at those people don't take away from their greatness. Rather, on the contrary, make them great people, right? Rabbi Steinsaltz liked to say that the Tanakh figures are not made out of plastic, right? Or he used to say they're not Barbie dolls, right, where everything's perfect. And that's why they're so great. And that's why we can actually learn from them and be affected in our own lives from these people who are not perfect, but still great, but still achieved amazing things. So that's the first book I thought about. And think about Rabbi Steinsaltz, by the way, in that way is so, those of us who knew him, he was so human and so simple and so practical. People would just meet him, walking around the street in Yerushalayim, taking a cab or being so simple and human and at the same time so great. The second book I want to mention is a book called My Rebbe. It's a book that came out a couple years ago, where Rabbi Steinsaltz writes about his own Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And many books were written about the Rebbe. You know, what could you write more that was not said about the Lubavitcher Rebbe? And what Rabbi Steinsaltz does in that book, which is not a long book, it's 180 pages or 200 pages. And someone wrote at the time that the book came that what a different writer tried to do in an 800-page book about the Lubavitcher Rebbe, he wasn't able to achieve what Rabbi Steinsaltz did in 200 pages. Why? Because Rabbi Steinsaltz says in that book, I'm not interested to present the miracles that the Lubavitcher Rebbe did in his life. And there were a few of them. And we know that the Lubavitcher Rebbe was not, you know, a miracle performer, but there's many stories where he was able to foresee something or pray for someone or give someone a blessing and it actually, right, worked or helped. But Rabbi Steinsaltz said, when I'm looking at the Rebbe, I want to understand his message. I want to change my life. I want to write a book that someone will read and say, okay, this is what the Lubavitcher Rebbe wanted to do in the world. This is what he wanted from me, specifically. And in order to do that, you need to draw a picture of the Lubavitcher Rebbe that is very realistic. Because as long as we're going to look at our Rebbes and sages as people who are beyond our ability to get to, we will never be able to be affected by them. And the more we make them human and understand that they were real, and at the same time they were able to, right, the Lubavitcher Rebbe was able to change the whole Jewish world, maybe change the whole world, right, itself. Right, Reb Steinsaltz said that it's such a classic way that Reb Steinsaltz would look at a person and say, what did the Lubavitcher Rebbe do in the world? So Reb Steinsaltz said I hope I'm right on the English words. He moved Judaism from being on the defense to the offense. Right? Isn't that beautiful? Right? He said, the Lubavitcher Rebbe said, we're not saying sorry anymore for being Jews, and we're not, right, explaining ourselves or being apologetic about our Judaism. We're moving forward. We want to move ourselves as Jews and the whole world towards Geulah, towards making the world closer to God, a better place between people. And in order to do that, we have to understand that these are really great things that are to be done and really hard to achieve and demand a lot of work and a lot of effort, but at the same time are very, very, as we say, close to us. We're really, really able to do it. Back to Rabbi Steinsaltz, again, these are the attributes that I find in him himself, right? The ability to want to change the whole entire world, but at the same time being very practical and have very organized ways of thinking and projects that he's putting together and plans, right? It's not only dreaming about things that are beyond us, it's actually putting it down to actualizing in the world. Okay, so that's the background of how I approach the talking about Rabbi Steinsaltz. I'm reminding everyone, whoever wants to pitch in and ask a question or comment, much welcome.
I have a question now that you raised that. How was he in a meeting? You have a meeting with him and there's something that has to be done. Did he sit down and talk to you very practically and say, now I want you to go to New York, I want you to talk to these people, and I want you to do X, Y, and Z, and then get back to me and we'll talk about it. How did he act in a meeting with you as a regular person?
Well, that's a great question. It's a great question. In personal meetings, the question is, what would be the matter? If you would come and get advice on a personal matter, or come and speak to him about your work or something practical, and it will change the way he would talk to you. But I think I'll say in a general way, he was very practical in those meetings, but at the same time, he liked to, at least the feeling I got from him many times was he would raise the questions. He would give out ways of thoughts. He would sort of lay out the options, but most of the times never tell you what to do. And that was part of his way as a rabbi, was to maybe direct you or to open you the options, but not choose for you. And there's something very practical about that, but also something that keeps it a little bit more loose. So I don't know if that totally answers your questions. I know that people who worked for him, who worked with him on projects, such as the projects of the Talmud or the different books that he did, or the people who worked with him on yeshivot that he built, got very, very clear sort of guidelines what to do. And that was part of the way he worked. And also at the same time, giving a lot of independence to the people who were coming to ask him questions. I'll get to it also in the continuation of the shiur. Okay, so a little bit after, I think the Shabbat after the rabbi passed away, the rabbi passed away on a Friday, I was looking in my notes a little bit, and I found some notes I took in one of the first shiurim I attended in the yeshiva in Tkoa when I was 18 in shiur Aleph in the first year in the yeshiva. And the Rav would give these late Thursday night talks. He would come around 11 o'clock at night and talk for 2-3 hours until 1:30, and then he would drive. That was for years. And that's obviously after a long day of work. And he came to the yeshiva, and I remembered how this affected me. And he says like this, and this also has to do with the topic of how do you speak about a great person. And he said to us like this, it's really important for me to tell you guys in yeshiva that you have to sit down and tell yourself what you're not going to be in life. And we're all like, what do you mean? He said, everyone needs to categorize themselves according to, first of all, what you're not going to be. You're not going to be a Rosh Hashiva. You're not going to be the greatest person in the world. You're not going to be, the next Rebbe. And he said, only the person who's able to realize what he's not going to be could re-identify himself with what he is. And he said to us the following. He says, I want to tell you, there aren't a lot of gdolim in the world. Gdolim are great people. He says, there aren't a lot of great people in the world. A lot of, I would say, superb or extraordinary people in the world. Most of the people are normal. And at first, as a yeshiva boy, you're kind of offended to hear that from your rabbi. But the next sentence that he said, which changed my life, was like this. He said, you're not going to be a gdoil. Not everyone could be a gdoil, but everyone could be, he said it in Hebrew, mashma'uti. Everyone could be important. Everyone could be, I would say, significant. He says, once you understand what you're not going to be, now you could start being who you are. Now you could start being, because if you're going to be dreaming about being that Rosh Hashiva, that rabbi, that person that you weren't born to be, you're never going to be yourself. And he went and Mamash extended, like in length, he spoke about this point. And it was very important for him to tell us guys, his students in yeshiva, it was the beginning of the year, like this time of the year. And he was saying, now start working hard. Now start doing something. Now that you know who you are, now start being that significant person that you could be. And he said, everyone could be significant, no matter where you are. By the way, he said, how do you know when someone is important? says when you're not when you are suddenly not where you were, and the other people realize that, right? When you were a part of a chevre, of a group, of a people, and then you're not there, everyone knows that Shabbos when the gabbai is sick and then nobody knows what to do in shul, right? Suddenly you realize that guy that everyone laughs at or that nobody actually pays attention to is actually important, right? And that's when you realize. But concluding that sikha, the Rav said something which wrapped it all together, and he said, by the way, now that you know that you're not a gdoid, and now that you know that you are significant, you also have another third thing to do, is identify those people who are really great and be close to them. That will make you a better person. That will make you a greater scholar. That will make you someone more devoted because you will be mushpa, you will be mamash, changed from those great people that you have the ability to be next to. And I think that kind of ties it together because they are gdoilim, and it is worthwhile to put that effort in being close to them. I had the zchut mamash to learn by Rabbi Steinsaltz, who was a great person. We have the zchut to talk about him. We have the ability to read his books, to watch his videos, right? That there is an option to get close to those people and enhance ourselves and make ourselves, bigger and wider than what we are. So all this, that was kind of an introduction. And I want to find all what we spoke about here in a great book that just came out a couple months ago. It's Rav Steinsaltz's commentary on Pirkei Avot. It didn't come out in English yet. I'm sure it will be translated, but it's mamash a beautiful translation, an explanation and kind of in-depth explanation to Pirkei Avot. And what's interesting in all of Rav Steinsaltz's commentaries is that he said that he worked very hard for us not to feel his personality in the commentary, right? He said he wanted to be shakuf, transparent in his commentaries. If you see it, if anyone ever learned with his Gemara, with his Talmud, or now the Tanakh came out, you see that he's very, very minimal in his pirush. And what he tries to do is sort of let you be able to learn on your own. And it was an amazing achievement of his because he said, it's not about me, it's about the text, it's about the Torah. And all I want to do is give you that opening, or he used to say, I want to give you a ride to make it a little quicker for you, right? He would say in Hebrew, we say tramping, you hitchhike. I want to hitch you a ride, give you a ride, so that you don't have to waste your time on the translations or the hard words, and that you could actually get to the thoughts themselves. But the places where you could see Rav Steinsaltz's really personality and his chidush is in the prefaces, the hakadamot that he writes before the actual books. And that's where he actually really gives in a beautiful way what he thinks about that book, particular book. And you could also see some of his personality. So what I wanted to do is I'm going to bring the Hebrew text. I'm going to share the screen right now, and we're going to go through it, and I'll translate the words as I read in Hebrew. So I hope those of you who are not so strong in Hebrew could follow, and we'll learn a little bit of Pirkei Avot. I see there's some chats here. Someone saying there's an original edition of biblical images. Okay. Interesting. Welcome, as I said, to comment. Any questions until now before we continue? Comments, questions? Okay, so let's...
Hi there. Yeah. Did Rabbi Steinsaltz consider himself a Gadol?
That's a great question. I think he was very much aware of, let's put it this way. First of all, I spoke about this with a friend this morning. He was very unique. I mean, he was born with a mind of a genius. And he was very much aware of that. And he spoke about it. He was aware of it. He spoke about how when he was a kid in first grade, he was bored because, he knew more than his teachers knew. He was really brilliant from birth. But at the same time, what he knew was also that being brilliant is not enough. And being smart is not enough. And we'll see that also in Akdama to Pirkei Avot in a moment that we're going to read. He knew that there's an effort to put, and he was very, very humble. He did not act as a gadol. I could put that, I was once in the States with him. This is a funny story. I was there on shlichut with two other guys, and we got the zchut to drive him from Washington, D.C. to New Jersey. It was a 4-hour drive, and it was raining raining hard. And Margie Ruth was in charge of all his visits in America. She said to us, I allow you to drive him, but you have to go and buy him a rain jacket. Because Rabbi Steinsaltz just came as is with his and anyone who met him, some of you met him, he was a very simple person. He walked around very simple. And we walked into the closest Macy's we saw off the highway, which is a very funny thing for a student to do with his Israeli rabbi. And Rabbi Steinsaltz, with all his smell he used to smoke a pipe, so he was smelling from his pipe. And the friend that was with me on shlichut was a Sfaradi guy, and he had no problem to ask direct questions. And he came to Rabbi Steinsaltz and said, Rabbi, why don't you wear like fancy clothes? Why don't you wear you look like a schlump? So Rabbi Steinsaltz said to him, it says in the Gemara that a Talmid Chacham makes sure that he wears clean clothes and make sure that he dresses, fine. And he said, Kanireh ani lo Talmid Chacham. It seems like I'm not a Talmid Chacham because I'm not dressed fancy. So he said that as a joke, and I think for me that was a kind of a window for him to see how he's aware of himself that he's a gdoil, but he's also able to sort of joke around and play with it and not be caught up with that sort of name and title that he has. And he was really, really a simple person. Used to come to the yeshiva and give over shiurim to 3-4 people and not even care how many people are in front of him. It didn't matter to him on what chair he's sitting or who's his audience. He just came to teach, and that was his humility was very, very big in that way. Okay, thanks for asking, Israel.
So Shlomo, just something quick that I just finished a book by Arthur Kurzweil about being his driver in America. That gave some interesting glimpses into him as a person. That was
okay. You remember a certain story from there? That kind of
No, not offhand. It just gives you an interesting glimpse of what he's like as a person sitting in the car driving around with it.
Yeah. You could probably get it on eBay or one of those.
Yeah, I think it's called Meetings on the Road. I don't remember. I could find it.
On the Road with Rabbi Steinsaltz, right? By Arthur Kurzweil.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's dive into the text. I'm going to share the screen. As I said, it's in Hebrew, and we're gonna read. This is not the whole Akdama. It's not the whole preference. It's a short piece of it. And he writes like this: what's the purpose of the book of Pirkei Avot? When I grew up, we all learned Pirkei Avot in a very young age, as a child. You started first grade, I don't know, even kindergarten. You say it by heart, and And I grew up it as being like the basic things that people need to do, right? Pirkei Avot, what every Jew should be acting like. And Rabbi Steinsaltz kind of has an interesting take on that. And he says, what's the point of this Masechet? Lemi noada Masechet. We're on line number 2. Masechet Avot, the book of Pirkei Avot, sheina sefer shel chok ela sefer musar. It's not a book of law, rather a book of ethics. Noada mitchila avur hayechidim. It's a book that was meant for individuals, meaning this book is not written to the nation of the Jews, to all the people together. These are to specific people, to every individual should read this. למרות שיש בה מסכת הדרכות הנוגעות לענייני הכלל, even though this tractate has different teachings that have to do with everyone, with the way the community should be. Etzot lamanigim, the way our leaders need to be acting. Leshoftim velamorei harabim, to our judges or to our teachers. Mikol makom ikara u'la'adam ha'prati. The main teachings of Pirkei Avot are for the individual person, how a person should act according to the Torah, according to the ethics. Rubam shel hadvarim, most of the teachings in Pirkei Avot, eno osek befilosofia mufshetet, does not deal with abstract philosophy, right? If we learn Pirkei Avot, what does it tell us? The way a person should wake up in the morning, the way a person should talk to his friends, what you shouldn't be saying, people you shouldn't be talking to, right? The way you should deal with when you're working or when you're doing business. It's a behavioral book, the way a person should behave in the world. כיצד עליו לנהוג עם הבריות, עם אלה הנמצאים בדרגה גבוהה ממנו, עם השווים לו, how must a person act with people who are bigger than him, more important than him, how must a person act with people who are equal to him, ועם אלו שהוא ממונה עליהם, and with people that he's in charge of them, ועוד יותר מזה, and more so, במהותו של האדם כשלעצמו. פרקי אבות deals with the essence of a person, מהם תכונות האופי שצריך אדם לסגל לעצמו, what kind of traits a person should have, ומהם הדברים שצריך להימנע או להתרחק מהם, right? What are the things a person should be, right? Far from, not being connected to. השאלות שהמסכת עונה עליהן, the questions that פרקי אבות answers, the questions that it's dealing with, הן בעיקר שאלותיו של האדם הפרטי, the questions of an individual, מה יעשה, what a person should do, כיצד ילמד את עצמו לנהוג בדרך המביאה אותו לשלמות הנפש, how should a person regulate himself to be complete, for his soul to be complete, ולשלמות המעשים, and that his actions are important. ההדרכות נבדלות זו מזו בהתאם לדעותיהם ולאופיים של החכמים שאמרו. The different הדרכות, the different, I would say, right, ways that Pirkei Avot are telling us to do have to do with the different rabbis who are teaching. And now this is, I'm on line 13, whoever's following. This is 3 lines that I bolted because I think they're important. Aval kulan, all the teachings of Pirkei Avot, mechovanot lo klape nezirim uprushim. Pirkei Avot is not written for people who are priests, who are separated from the community, who are not, right, who are these holy people who go, like we see in different religions, right, and disconnect themselves from the people in order to be holy. That's not what Pirkei Avot is about. אלא לאנשים בתוך העולם. Pirkei Avot is written for people who are working in the world, עוסקים איש איש במלאכתו ותפקידו, who are working, everyone, and doing their own work and whatever they are dealing with in a normal way, in a normal society. ועם זאת, and together with that, they're trying to be, רוצים לעשות את הדברים בדרך הטוב. People who want to do things that are in the best way. And we'll go back to this text in a moment. I just want to stop here a second and go back to Rabbi Steinsaltz and say, this is what he spoke to us about. As I said in the beginning, when he told us in yeshiva, you're not gdoilim, right? He was telling us at the same time, yeah, I remember he said to one of my friends, he said, you need to be a general in the army. Because he saw that that person had this, right, this sense of leadership and this kind of, personality that's really mat'im, that really goes well in the army. But he said, he didn't tell him, go to the army and be a soldier. He said, go to the army and be an officer, right? He says, I want you to be normal people. I want you to be those people who are working in whatever different, right, whatever trade or work or whatever you choose to do in the world. But in that place, you could be greater. And that's what Pirkei Avot is teaching us. Pirkei Avot is not a book for those people who are, right, leaving the world, who are, right, excommunicating themselves from the world. But the paradox is in there. And I think that this is where I want to touch a paradox that I felt from Rabbi Steinsaltz himself. Rabbi Steinsaltz's work was to bring Judaism to the mass, right? He said, let my people know. Everyone should be learning Talmud. I don't care if you're religious or not religious. But at the same time, those who he met individually or those who learned with him in yeshivot, he demanded from us to be much more than normal people. I would say even he demanded from us to be some sort of elite. Right? He used to say to us in yeshiva, a person who didn't learn all of Shas, all of the Gemara, all of Tanakh, all of Zohar, and all of Rambam, and he used to say it's only 4 books, right? Those 4 books, cannot open up his mouth. You can't talk to me if you didn't. That's a huge, right? That's a huge demand from yeshiva boys or from anyone. And for him, that was the basic. For him, that was like nothing. He said, there are only 4 books. He said, you read all of Harry Potter, you should be able to read, all of the Talmud and all of the Tanakh. And at the same time, he was able to create this sort of elite, this sort of demand that was, the ref was so high, and at the same time, go and do all that work to go and present it for people who are simple. And this is where I wanted to go back to Pirkei Avot, because he's saying, well, Pirkei Avot is written for those normal people who are working. But those of us, I'm sure all of us read and learned Pirkei Avot in our lives different ways, right? Let's think about what are the teachings in Pirkei Avot, right? What kind of demands are we demanded in Pirkei Avot, right? Don't sleep late in the morning, Rabbi Akiva says, right? Wake up early in the morning. Don't talk with no reason. Don't waste your time. Those are things that are not regular people don't, normally achieve in a simple way. And I'm going to go back to the text now, and we'll see that inside. I'm gonna jump down to line 25. העקרונות והמטרות של מסכת אבות ראויים שכל אדם ישאף אליהם. The principles and goals of מסכת אבות are meant for every person to be yearning and wanting to achieve. אלא, but there's something important to realize, שמבחינה ריאלית, in a realistic way, הדרישות וההבחנות שלה אינם שייכים לחברה בכללה. If you want to be realistic, the goals of Pirkei Avot and the demanding of the simple person is not realistic. Who of us could do all what's written in Pirkei Avot? Ela, it is practical לאותם אנשי המעלה המצויים בתוכה, for that sect of people, that those gdoilim, those people who are specific, could actually do that. הנדרשים להתחייבות גבוהות וחמורות יותר. People want to take upon themselves higher and more stringent ways of behavior. Only certain people could actually achieve what's written in Pirkei Avot. ההדרכות שבמסכת הן במפורש, the laws or the teachings of this Masechet are what's called Mishnat Chasidim, the teachings of the pious. That's how Chazal speak about Pirkei Avot. ספרם של אנשים שהם החלק המובחר, המעולה של הציבור. People who are really great and really elite, not the simple people of the community. That's what Pirkei Avot, you can't teach Pirkei Avot to first graders, right? It needs to be, the second degree, third degree. It's a PhD, it's not for the simple people, says Rabbi Steinsaltz here. But at the same time, this Mishnat Chasidim, this teachings for the pious, is also, contains in it the exact opposite or the exact other part of the story. And he says like this, Anashim, on line 31, Shavura Meshamesh Sefer Adracha Matmedet, this book that the people who learn it all the time are called Talmidei Chachamim. We know that we call our rabbis and teachers Talmidei Chachamim, and it's a very interesting expression in Judaism, if anyone ever thought about it for a moment. What is Talmidei Chachamim? Talmid is a student. So I call my teacher, my rabbi, my sage, I call him a teacher. I don't call him a teacher. I call him my student, the student of the wise, right? I translate it as student as the wise, students of the wise, right? The Talmidei Chachamim. That's the exact opposite of being that elite. It's the simple person who's learning, not the person who's teaching. But that's exactly what Rabbi Steinsaltz is able to capture here in Pirkei Avot. And he says, let's realize that the demands are on the top. The demands are high. But at the same time, the realistic view is not the demands, rather the people, and the ability of doing it in being Talmidei Chachamim. And he says like this, Talmid Chacham hu hakinui shebo nikru anashim elu. It's the expression that we call these people, these great people. Shelo ratzu likro la'atzmam chachamim. Going back to the question, Rabbi Steinsaltz knew that he was a gdoil. He probably knew, but he didn't want to call himself a chacham. He wanted to call himself a talmid chacham, a student. אלא לראות את עצמם רק בגדר של תלמידיהם של חכמים. They wanted to always see themselves as those students of the wise people. האנשים המקבלים את החוכמה ממוריהם. The people who receive, not who are giving, rather receivers of the wisdom. I'm here on line number 1. הרואים את עצמם כל ימיהם, גם בהיותם מורים ומנהיגים לרבים. People who see themselves all their lives, even when they're teachers and leaders, begeder shel talmidim, as the people who are students. שלעולם אינם מגיעים אל השלמות, אלא רק שואפים והולכים לקראתה. They never get to be completing, but are always ascending and wanting and yearning to get to that greatness. And I'll stop here in a moment to read, and I just want to read one more sentence. שכבה זו, שהייתה מבחינה היסטורית שכבת המנהיגות של העם היהודי. In a historical way, this sort of sect in our tradition, in our communities, the תלמידי חכמים, he calls them בעיקרה אריסטוקרטיקה פתוחה, an open aristocracy. I don't know if this is an expression that he made up himself, but it's a great expression. And I want to delve into it a little bit without the text. What is an aristocrat? How do you say it in English? I know the English aristocracy. What is an aristocracy? Someone who was born into it. My father was a king. My grandfather was a king, so I'll be a king, right? My father or my uncle or my great uncle was the leader, and therefore I was born into it. Those are the chachamim, the gdoilim, those great people. Comes Rabbi Steinsaltz and says, that's not our Jewish tradition. Our Jewish tradition is talmidei chachamim, the students of the chachamim. And that is open for anyone. The demands are going to be very high, but the ability to achieve is open for everyone. And we know that, by the way, in history, right? Everyone knows that Rabbi Akiva, until he was 40, didn't know how to read Aleph Bet. But that person who is willing to put the effort and willing to take these demands that are so high and work with it, he will be welcomed into that aristocracy, into that high-level person. Again, Rabbi Steinsaltz is saying, I'm not demanding you to be what you're not, but I'm demanding you to extend yourself to be who you are in the greatest way you can. And that is only if I demand from you more and more. So you're going to be reading Pirkei Avot all your life. Are you going to be exactly doing everything that's written in Pirkei Avot? Probably not. And this is one of the things that Rabbi Steinsaltz also teaches us a lot. And this has to do, I'm giving a promo for the next shiur for next week. This has to do with also a great book that Rabbi Steinsaltz was a big fan of, and he wrote a long commentary on the book of the Tanya that the Alter Rebbe of Chabad wrote, very famous book. And I like to say that now that Rabbi Steinsaltz passed away, so you could say things about him and not feel as awkward. For many years, I thought that Rabbi Steinsaltz was the only person that I met in my life who actually, I would say, was the Beinoni of the Tanya, was this character that the Tanya sort of draws for us, who he wants us to be. Because the Tanya tells us like this: I don't want you to be a tzaddik. You're not a tzaddik. You were born as a Beinoni. But anyone who reads the Tanya and sees what he categorizes as the Beinoni knows that that is so far from anyone that I know in his regular life, right? But again, Rav Steinsaltz comes and says, what the motto of the Tanya is, Aderech Aruka V'Aktsara, the long and short way. It's not going to happen from today to tomorrow. It's a long process. If you put the effort, and Rabbi Steinsaltz said, I'll give you all what you need so you could put the effort. I'll write for you books. I'll translate for you books. I'll come wherever you ask me to come in the world, to come and teach you and lecture for you and speak to you. But you're going to have to do that work on your own. Not for a day or two, but for your whole life. That is the notion of Talmidei Chachamim. We are always going to be students. We're always going to be those Beinonim, those people who are in the middle, but not regular ones, great ones. Going back to what he told us in that that in the beginning of the yeshiva, don't be a gdoil, but be someone important, be someone meaningful. And in order for you're not meaningful if, right, a friend is not meaningful if you meet him once. A friend is meaningful if you have a devoted connection for years, right? It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen, and you would say that about tefillah, about many things. Because you're not going to wake up in the morning. There's once in a year you're going to wake up in the morning and have this awakening to pray to God, right? But what's with all the rest of the year? You have to work hard. And the demandings will be up on the top, up in the sky. And you are able to be there. You're able to get there. Okay, I talked too much. Do you want? I kind of want to feel you guys out. Do you want to see a little bit more of the text and finish it, or comment, questions? Where are you at? Okay, I could talk the whole night, but I think
more would be great.
Yeah. Sorry, Levi?
I'm just curious. We have a very nice group of people joining us today, and I'm wondering who in the group has had a personal contact with Rabbi Steinsaltz, as short as it was, and what did you take away from it?
Okay, I see there's various people here, and some were mamash close to him for many years. If anyone wants to say something quick, I'll be happy to. But if not, maybe we'll at the end of the shiur give an option for that. Okay. But I want to just focus on these points before we finish. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'll go back to the text for one last paragraph, and then we'll kind of wrap it up. I'll share the screen again. So we were speaking about this open aristocracy, as I said, and I'll read this bolted sentence in number 8, line number 8. Kol adam haya muzman umesugal le'tztaref elea. Let's be precise on the words here for a moment. Kol adam, every person, haya muzman, is invited, umesugal, and is able. Everyone is able to come into this circle of elite people. If you show that you're worthy of it, you have to show that you're worthy of it. Let's go to the last paragraph, line 21. I'll just say what he wanted to say in this paragraph that I jumped over. He says that being a Talmid Chacham requires 2 parts of it. It's also being very intellectual, but also being very real and very ethical. And he says you can't be one of them, right? Being ethical without being intellectual is beautiful, but it's not that, that area. That's not the highest achievement we want from a person. We want you also to be ethical and also to behave in a proper way, but we also want you to be intellectual and spiritual, right? And learned. But also the opposite. If you're only intellectual and you don't have those traits in you that are actualizing what you learned and what you know, right? So then what is it worth it? The Talmid Chacham is that person who's combining, and that's why Pirkei Avot is so important, because it combines all these areas, both of mind and heart and actions, right? Such a combination that contains it all. Last paragraph. Masechet Avot mi Pirkei Hadracha le'ish ha'ma'ala. Masechet Avot is the teachings that we teach a person who is really great and really high, the ish ha'ma'ala, the elite person. Ketzad alav linhog, how is he supposed to act? Ketzad alav ledaber, how is a person supposed to talk? Ketzad alav lachshov, what are you even supposed to think about? Right, to that extent of, right, actions, thoughts, speech. Even those abstract philosophical areas of the book, everything has a goal of being more ethical and being more practical in the world. And this is going back to someone asked in the beginning of the shiur, how was Rav Steinsaltz a practical person? Rav Steinsaltz was great in giving us a framework of thinking. He never took us to the conclusions. He was the one who built us the frameworks of thinking. A friend told me that he was there. Rav Steinsaltz wrote he didn't write the commentary, for the Tanakh. Rather, he taught it, and he was. This is one of the ways that they did some of the books, that he would teach it and be recorded. So basically, he taught the whole Tanakh, and from his teachings, he they how do you say, transcribed it and made it into a book. And my friend Yoel said he was invited to listen to the Rav while teaching because he didn't want to like speak to the camera. He wanted to speak to people. And every time he would ask a question during the shiur, he said Rav Steinsaltz did not comment on the questions for 2 or 3 sessions. So at the end of the 3rd session, he said to him, Rabbi, why aren't you answering my questions? So he said, your questions are great, but I want the people who are going to read my commentary to ask them themselves. I don't want to answer the questions for them. He said, if you would ask me what is the meaning of a word, I would answer you, because that's something important to tell someone, a translation of the word. He said, if you would ask me what kind of plant is written in this section or what kind of animal is described in this part of the Torah, I would answer you. But when you're asking me the philosophical questions, I want the learner to ask himself. I want to lead you to that place where you're going to ask it and maybe find your own answer. Klalut I'm going back to the text. Misgeret machshavtit, a framework that includes dvarim atzrichim nitbateh b'foan. And this is something that's also important. It has to come out and be actualized in the world. The Torah is not a philosophical book that is not connected to the world. En b'sefer hazeh hadracha shitatit. It's not a systematic way of explaining. You know, one of the things I'm afraid that will happen now to Rav Steinsaltz is that people will say, the Mishnah, the teachings, you know, the way of Rav Steinsaltz. No, Rav Steinsaltz is not, you know, a systematic way of living. Rav Steinsaltz is a framework. Rav Steinsaltz is an opening of thoughts, an opening of ways. You got to do the work on your own. It's not a system that I'm putting you into. Rather, it's a world of thought and actions that you could sort of, as you said before, join. Rav Steinsaltz is inviting us. He's not grabbing us, you know, intensely. There's no systematic way how you could be a great person. But, someone who takes these etzot, these ways of life, these frameworks, and actualizes it in his life, someone who puts it inside of him, that is a person who is a part of being a Talmid Chacham. It's not about what you achieve necessarily. It's about the derech, about being on the way. He once said to us in a Fembringen, and I'll conclude with this, and I want to hear from you guys what do you take from this learning together. He once said, a person calls himself a chassid, right? I'm a chassid. He said, how could a person call himself a chassid? Are you really that great? So he says, the only reason you could categorize yourself as a chassid, I would say, right, what we saw here as a Talmid Chacham, is by saying that's where I want to get to. It's called Nikra al Shem Sofo. You get the name for what you're trying to achieve, not necessarily what you are achieved. And he said, you know, when I say to a person, I'm driving from here to Tel Aviv, said, what are you saying you're driving here from Tel Aviv? That's not true. You're first driving, you're going into your car, and you're going to Yerushalayim, and then you're going on the highway, and then you go by Modi'in. There's a lot of stops on the way from here to Tel Aviv. But if I'm going to Tel Aviv, I'm going to say I'm driving to Tel Aviv, right? If I want to be a chassid, I'll say I'm a chassid. That's where I'm striving to be. And now start working hard to be there. I can't. There one last book is someone commented about Arthur Kurzweil. Said the story. Arthur Kurzweil would pick up Reb Steinsaltz from the airport in New York every time Reb Steinsaltz for years would travel to New York, and take him to his meetings. He said one Sunday morning, this is the late 80s, he picks up Rav Steinsaltz and he says, your next meeting is at 10 o'clock. It's 7 o'clock in the morning. You want to go somewhere before the next meeting? So Steinsaltz says, take me to the Lubavitcher Rebbe. He's giving out dollars, on Sunday mornings he would give out the dollars. So I want to go and greet my Rebbe. So they stand in line, as I said, as a simple person. And somewhere there's Sarah Rav Steinsaltz, so he did grab into that. And Arthur says, I was his driver, so I got to go with Rav Steinsaltz to greet the Rebbe. And they greeted the Rebbe. Everything was very quick there. Thousands of people waiting. And the Rebbe says to him, greets Rav Steinsaltz, they speak for a minute, and then Rav Steinsaltz says to the Rebbe, this is my driver, Arthur. Come meet him. So the Rebbe looks at him and he says to him like this. He says, I want to tell you that you're driving someone very important. And that's that's a chashuv thing to do. But you should always remember that to get to where you need to be, you're the only one who could drive. Nobody's going to drive you there. Right? What was he saying? And that's what Reb Steinsaltz told us in that shiur in the beginning of my yeshiva years. He said, you're not going to be a gdoil. You're going to be who you are. But you need to drive there and work hard to get to that spot. At the same time, it's very important for you to connect to those gdoilim. Put yourself, find that Rabbi Steinsaltz, read that book, look at that shiur, right? Connect to that greatness, and that will help you to do the work on your own. So, I spoke enough. I would love for us to do a little, round. Whoever wants to share something that you kind of take with you from this learning, and you could comment something very short, just 1 or 2 words, and we'll wrap it up much in 2-3 minutes. Anyone want to share?
I wanted to say that Harav Alav Shalom was a very honest person. And I think that sometimes being honest, you are misunderstood in what it is that you are trying to say. And I think that he, for lack of a better term, he suffered because I think that many Lubavitchers, especially after the split, after the Mishichim and the others, split after the Rebbe's passing, he said, look, in his lifetime, no one was more qualified to be the Mashiach than the Rebbe. But now that he is gone, we do not say that he is the Mashiach, and he suffered for this. And I think that his Rebbe book was a way of reminding everybody that who he was influenced by the Rebbe, and that even the Talmud that he did, if it didn't have the Rebbe's blessing, would not have come to be.
Okay, that's true. And I do want to say about that honesty, there were people who sometimes got offended from that honesty.
Right.
And one thing that I know personally and from people who told me, and Rav Steinsaltz said this also, he said, I'm planting seeds in people, and sometimes it's not so, it doesn't feel so, so fun. And it goes back to what I said with those demands that he demanded from all of us, right? But he said the seeds, it takes time, but it flourishes and it grows and it actually comes out. And sometimes, Rav Steinsaltz would say something to someone, or any of us would hear something or read something, and it kind of hides in us for years sometimes, and then it sort of awakens and resonates, right? And is mashpia on our lives. So we also have to remember that also, that we take these seeds and we need to collect them and nourish them, and hopefully one day they sort of grow in us, the beautiful plants. Okay, thank you, Shaul. Sal.
Hey, I want to ask a question. When he was put in Herem, and his books and himself was put in terem. Do you know how he responded or how he felt about that? That he missed the boat, he did something wrong, or he should have done X instead of Y, or how did he feel about that? Did he ever talk about that?
Okay, these are good questions. I'll comment. I'm just saying in my shiur, I was trying to like put a second the politics aside and deal with the depth of it. I will tell you,
Politics. It's about the Rebbe.
it's important to say. Rav Steinsaltz was very bothered by it. It's not like people, it was not easy for him in those years. One Rosh Hashanah, we learned with him, it was a Rosh Hashanah night, and very late at night, he would come to the yeshiva, Makor Chaim, every year, and we would pray with him, and then at night, and then we would eat with him, and we would learn Mishnayot in the meal, and then later on, he would go back to the Beit Midrash and teach whoever, the 20 guys who came. And one year, he decided to teach Rabbi Nachman of Breslev, and he opened it up randomly, and it spoke about, Rabbi Nachman says that a real tzaddik has machlokot on him, has disagreements on him. And he taught it, and he said, Rabbi Nachman speaks about it. Rabbi Nachman himself had many disagreements on him in his lifetime. And Rabbi Nachman says that if a person is trying to do something that's holy and teach and bring something new to the world, there will always be those people who are going against him, and he shouldn't be weak from that. That's just a sign that he's doing something right. And then one of the students said, Rav, did you feel like that when you were in Cherem and when people were against? And he looked, and there was one of those moments. Rabbi Steinsaltz was very rare, personal with us. He was very intimate with himself. He didn't expose it as easy. And it was one of those moments where he looked at us and he said, "It's not worth it. It's not so fun," right? Going back to that human part of it, right? What I said, the real Gdolim are real people, are human, right? It's not like Rav Steinsaltz said, "I'm doing the right thing. I don't care what other people think about me." Not at all. I'm doing the right thing, and I'm not going to stop. But it's also very painful and very, very human-like of him to be hurt from it, right? When people go against you. Baruch Hashem, by the way, he had the courage to overcome that, right? And do his work. And I think today, people appreciate him from all sects, right? And it's just going to be greater and greater, I'm sure. Okay, so thank you for bringing it up, Mr. Weinstein. Sima, you wanted to say?
Yeah, my computer overheated outside, so shut down. So forgive me if I'm repeating something that you already got to, but I'm just thinking about where we are right now in Elul and thinking about, like, I can't believe I have to confess the same thing again that I confessed last year that I said I was going to work on. And so I'm sort of taking from this that if Rabbi Steinsaltz was whispering in my ear, he'd say, you can either sit here and feel bad and discouraged, or you can get busy and really start the hard work. So I'm kind of taking that from
I'll give you even more chizuk. If you're bothered from the same thing that you were bothered last year, that means that you're really bothered by it, right? And you're actually working on it, right? If you would forget about it the year later, right? That means that wasn't so important. So exactly what you're saying, the consistency, and it's not fun to look at our flaws, right? And do that tshuva. It's not something that, that it's fun to do. But by the way, Rav Steinsaltz also taught us to do it b'simcha. And one of those experiences, being with him on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, for me was always an experience of being somewhere safe. He gave this feeling that everything's okay, even though it's the day of judgment, and he was serious. He wasn't kidding around, and he would be serious on Rosh Hashanah, and he would give us very serious talks before Tkiyat Shofar, and on Yom Kippur before Neilah. The words were very serious, but the feeling was very, very, as I said, safe, batuach. God loves us. God wants us. Hashem is with us. and we would sing and dance with him. And I think that's together, one of the things I'm going to miss. Hopefully, now we don't have him in present to feel that bitachon, but we have to work harder now to find it inside of us. So I bless us all to really feel that in these weeks of Tshuva and Rosh Hashanah. Anyone that we didn't hear, just want to say, Reb Moshe, do you want to say something to conclude? Okay.
I wanted to say,
Yes, please.
Shlomo's aunt,
And
that I never had the zchut to personally know Rav Steinsaltz, but I see the big influence he's had on thousands and thousands of young boys and men and women. And I've always wanted to know him and to get to know him. And I'm very grateful, Shlomo, that you're giving me this opportunity to open my eyes to who he was and is. As they say, Talmidei Chachamim, they live on by what we learn from them. The neshama carries on living. They're still with us. If we carry on learning their svarim, their great things that they've written, and their musar. And I want to just thank you, Shlomo. I really enjoyed this hakdama, this shiur, and Bezrat Hashem, I'll listen to more. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. We're going to conclude. just want to say that they put together a WhatsApp group. If you want to look on the chat of down here in the chat of the Zoom. Whoever wants to, it's called the English Shalhevet Steinsaltz. It's going to be a WhatsApp group just for sort of giving updates about the shiurim in English, and maybe even giving the source sheets before the shiurim, whoever wants to prepare. So you're mamash welcome to join that. And tomorrow night there's a shiur in English by Rabbi Israel Malkiel, preparing for the high holidays. And next week on Tuesday, the same hour, 9 o'clock, I will give the next part of the shiur, which will deal with Rabbi Steinsaltz and the Tanya, his commentary on the Tanya. So Laila Tov to everyone, wherever you are. It's great meeting you. Thank you, everyone. And we'll see you next time. All right.